The funeral director was still talking when Marcus saw them. His ex-girlfriend Sophia, hiding in the back of the cathedral with two little girls who had his eyes. Not similar eyes. His exact eyes. The rare hazel color that only ran in his bloodline. Sophia's face went ghost white the second she realized he'd spotted her. She grabbed both children and ran. But it was too late. Marcus had seen the truth written in those tiny faces, and now he had to choose. Chase the woman who'd disappeared with his secret, or let his daughters vanish from his life forever. The rain fell in relentless sheets against the stained glass. Windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral, each droplet catching the muted light and casting fractured rainbows across the mahogany pews. Marcus Blackwood stood at the front of the church, his 6-foot frame rigid beneath his tailored black suit, watching as mourners filed past his mother's casket, with whispered condolences that felt like distant echoes in his grief-numbed mind. 32. Marcus had built an empire from nothing. Tech companies, real estate ventures, investment portfolios that most people could only dream of. Forbes had called him the Golden Touch just last month. But standing here surrounded by the scent of lilies and the weight of finality, all his millions felt as worthless as pocket change. Eleanor Blackwood had been the only person who'd ever seen past his success to the scared little boy who'd once promised her he'd make something of himself. Now she was gone, and he felt more alone than he had since those hungry nights in their cramped apartment 20 years ago. The funeral director's voice droned on about eternal rest and peaceful slumber, but Marcus barely heard the words. His hazel eyes, the same unusual golden-green shade his mother had always said made him special, scanned the crowd mechanically. Business associates, society friends, distant relatives who'd suddenly remembered they cared now that Eleanor was gone. The usual suspects at the funeral of a wealthy man's mother. Then he saw her. Sophia Martinez stood near the back of the cathedral, partially hidden behind a marble pillar, her dark hair longer than he remembered, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple black dress that somehow made her more beautiful than any of the designer gowns adorning the other women in attendance. But it wasn't her unexpected presence that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat, and his heart slam against his ribs like a caged bird. It was the two small hands she held in hers. Twin girls, maybe 4 or 5 years old, stood on either side of Sophia like perfect mirror images. Their dark hair was pulled back in matching ponytails, their small faces solemn as they gazed around the imposing cathedral with wide, curious eyes. Eyes that made Marcus's world tilt on its axis. Hazel eyes, the exact same rare golden-green shade that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. The funeral director's voice faded to white noise. The mourners, the flowers, the very air in the cathedral seemed to disappear as Marcus locked gazes with Sophia across the crowded space. Her face went pale when she realized he'd spotted her, and for a moment that stretched like eternity. They simply stared at each other across 5 years of silence and a cathedral full of secrets. One of the little girls tugged on Sophia's dress and whispered something that made Sophia's eyes dart toward the exit. Marcus watched, his mind reeling, as she bent down to scoop up both children. His children, a voice in his head whispered with terrifying certainty, and began moving toward the back of the church. She was leaving. Again. What secrets has Sophia been keeping, and why did she choose today, of all days, to bring those beautiful little girls with his eyes to his mother's funeral? The service continued around him, but Marcus Blackwood stood frozen in a moment that would change everything, watching the woman who'd once held his heart disappear into the storm, with 2 little girls who might just be the most important discovery of his life. Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around, I need YouTube support now more than ever. Thank you for sticking around with me. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Marcus's legs moved before his mind could catch up, carrying him down the center aisle as the priest's voice continued to echo through the cathedral. He pushed past mourners with mumbled apologies, his heart hammering against his ribs as he fought through the crowd. But by the time he reached the heavy oak doors, Sophia and the girls had vanished into the storm. The rain hit him like a physical blow as he stepped onto the cathedral steps, soaking through his expensive suit in seconds. He scanned the parking lot desperately, catching a glimpse of a silver Honda Civic pulling out onto the main road, its taillights disappearing into the gray afternoon like dying embers. "Mr. Blackwood?" His assistant, James, appeared at his elbow, with an umbrella. "Sir, the service isn't over. People are asking—" "Handle it," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't name. "Make my apologies. Family emergency." James's eyebrows shot up, but he nodded. In the 3 years he'd worked for Marcus, he'd never seen his boss lose his composure. Marcus Blackwood was legendary for his control, his ability to navigate any situation with calculated precision. But standing there in the rain, staring at the empty road, he looked like a man whose world had just shattered. As Marcus drove through the winding streets of Millbrook Heights toward his penthouse, memories crashed over him like waves against a crumbling seawall. Sophia Martinez. The name still sent electricity through his veins, even after 5 years of trying to forget her. She'd been a graduate student at Columbia when they met, working 3 jobs to pay for her psychology degree while he was building his first company from his cramped studio apartment. She'd been everything he wasn't. Warm where he was guarded, optimistic where he was cynical, content with simple pleasures while he chased success with single-minded determination. She'd loved him when he had nothing but dreams and ramen noodles, when his biggest asset was a laptop held together with duct tape and stubborn hope. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of stolen moments between her classes and his 18-hour workdays. Late nights in coffee shops where she'd quiz him on business plans while he helped her study for exams. Walks through Central Park where she'd point out things he never noticed. The way light filtered through leaves, the sound of children's laughter, the simple magic of being alive and in love. But success had changed him, or maybe it had just revealed who he'd always been underneath. The bigger his company grew, the more demanding he became. The more money he made, the less time he had for quiet conversations and Sunday morning pancakes. He'd started missing dates for board meetings, canceling weekend plans for business trips, choosing ambition over the woman who'd believed in him when no one else would. The fight that ended everything still haunted his dreams. Sophia had been accepted to a PhD program in child psychology, a full scholarship that would have meant everything to her. But it was in Seattle, 3,000 miles from his expanding empire in New York. She'd asked him to come with her, or at least to try long distance. He'd told her he couldn't leave, not when he was so close to everything he'd worked for. "What about everything we've worked for?" she'd asked, tears streaming down her face in his sterile penthouse apartment. "What about us, Marcus? When did your dreams become more important than ours?" He'd been too proud, too focused on his vision of success to see what he was losing. "This is who I am, Sophia. This is what I do. If you can't handle that, then maybe we're not as compatible as we thought." She'd left that night, taking nothing but her clothes and the engagement ring he'd given her just 2 months earlier. A ring that had cost more than most people's cars, but somehow felt worthless when she placed it on his kitchen counter with shaking hands. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus," she'd whispered. "I really do. But I can't wait around while you figure out that success without love is just expensive loneliness." He'd thrown himself into work after that, building his empire with ruthless efficiency. Every deal, every acquisition, every $1 million success had been both a victory and a reminder of what he'd sacrificed to achieve it. He'd dated other women, beautiful, accomplished women who understood his world and didn't ask for more than he was willing to give. But none of them had ever made him feel the way Sophia had, like he was more than just his bank account and business acumen. Now pulling into his private garage beneath Blackwood Tower, Marcus couldn't shake the image of those two little girls. With his eyes. The timeline fit perfectly. If Sophia had been pregnant when she left, the children would be about 4 now. But why hadn't she told him? Why had she let him believe she'd simply moved on, started a new life without him? His penthouse felt more like a mausoleum than a home as he paced across the marble floors, still in his rain-soaked funeral suit. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he'd conquered, but all he could see were 2 small faces with hazel eyes that mirrored his own. Do you think Sophia was right to keep the children a secret? Or should she have told Marcus about them from the beginning? What would you have done in her situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The silence in his apartment was deafening, broken only by the rain against the windows and the sound of his own ragged breathing. For the first time in 5 years, Marcus Blackwood, the man who had everything, realized he might have nothing at all. Marcus spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled chaos, using every resource at his disposal to find Sophia Martinez. His private investigator, David Chen, was the best money could buy. A former FBI agent who could track down anyone, anywhere. But Sophia had covered her tracks well. "She's not using her maiden name anymore," David reported over the phone, his voice crackling through the speaker in Marcus's office. No social media presence under Sophia Martinez. No credit cards, no lease agreements, nothing. It's like she vanished into thin air after leaving New York. Marcus stared out at the city skyline, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Keep looking. Expand the search. Try variations of her name, married names, anything. About that, boss. David's hesitation made Marcus's stomach clench. I found a marriage certificate from 4 years ago. Sophia Martinez married a Dr. Michael Chen, no relation to me, in Seattle. Pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Married. Sophia was married. The mother of his children, because he was certain now that they were his, had built a life with another man. A doctor who probably came home for dinner every night, who probably read bedtime stories and attended school plays, and did all the things Marcus had been too busy to imagine. Wanting. There's more, David continued. Dr. Chen died 18 months ago. Car accident on I-5 during a snowstorm. He was coming home from an emergency surgery. Relief and guilt crashed through Marcus in equal measure. Relief that Sophia was no longer married, guilt for feeling relieved about another man's death. A man who had probably been a father to his daughters. Find her current address, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. I don't care what it costs. By Friday afternoon, Marcus was on his private jet to Seattle, his hands shaking as he reviewed the file David had compiled. Sophia Chen, she'd kept her married name, lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in the Wallingford neighborhood. She worked as a child psychologist at a community center, making a fraction of what she could have earned in private practice. The twins, Emma and Lily Chen, attended Wallingford Elementary School. His daughters had names. His daughters had a life he knew nothing about. The flight felt endless, every minute stretching like hours, as Marcus wrestled with what he would say, how he would approach the woman who had disappeared with his children. Anger warred with longing, hurt battled with hope. By the time the plane touched down at Boeing Field, he felt like he might shatter from the pressure building in his chest. Sophia's house was everything his penthouse wasn't. Warm, lived in, surrounded by a small garden where children's toys lay scattered across the grass. A tire swing hung from an old oak tree, and chalk drawings decorated the front walkway. It looked like a home where laughter lived, where bedtime stories were read and scraped knees were kissed better. Marcus sat in his rental car for 20 minutes, gathering courage he'd never needed for any business deal or board meeting. Through the front window he could see movement, small figures darting back and forth, the sound of children's voices carrying on the evening air. Finally, he forced himself out of the car and up the front steps. His hand trembled as he raised it to knock, and for a moment he almost turned around. What right did he have to disrupt their lives? What if Sophia slammed the door in his face? What if the girls were afraid of him? But before he could knock, the door swung open. "Mommy, there's a man—" The voice stopped abruptly as one of the twins, Emma or Lily, he couldn't tell which, stared up at him with wide hazel eyes. She was even more beautiful up close, with Sophia's delicate features and his distinctive eye color. She wore a pink tutu over jeans and had paint smudges on her cheeks. "Emma, what did I tell you about opening the door without—" Sophia's voice cut off as she appeared behind her daughter, a dish towel in her hands and flour in her dark hair. She looked exactly as he remembered, and completely different. Older, more tired, but with a maternal softness that made his chest ache. For a moment they simply stared at each other across the threshold, 5 years of silence stretching between them like a chasm. "Hello, Sophia," Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Her face went through a dozen emotions: shock, fear, anger, something that might have been longing, before settling into a mask of careful composure. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I think you know why I'm here." His eyes dropped to Emma, who was still staring at him with curious intensity. "We need to talk." "Mommy, who is this man?" Another voice piped up as the second twin appeared, identical to her sister except for a small scar above her left eyebrow. "He has eyes like ours." The innocent observation hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sophia's face went pale, and Marcus felt his heart stop beating entirely. "Girls, go wash up for dinner," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I need to talk to Mr. Blackwood." "But Mommy—" "Now please." The twins exchanged a look that was far too knowing for 4-year-olds before disappearing into the house, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. Sophia stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her, and suddenly they were alone for the first time in 5 years. "How did you find us?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold. "Does it matter?" Marcus stepped closer, and she didn't back away. "Sophia, those girls, they're mine, aren't they?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Sophia's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she nodded once, sharp and definitive. "Yes," she whispered. "They're yours." The admission hit him like a tsunami, washing away every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his heart. He had daughters. 2 beautiful, perfect daughters who had been living and breathing and growing up without him for 4 years. Why? The word came out broken, raw with pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and when she looked at him, he saw the ghost of the woman who had once loved him completely. "Because I knew you'd try to take them from me," she said, "and because they deserved better than a father. Who would choose his empire over his family?" What do you think Marcus should say to convince Sophia he's changed? Can a man who chose success over love really become the father these girls need? Share your thoughts below about whether people can truly change. The words cut deeper than any business rival's betrayal, deeper than any financial loss he'd ever suffered, because somewhere in his heart, Marcus knew she was right. The man he'd been 5 years ago would have seen his daughters as another acquisition, another responsibility to be managed by nannies and private schools while he continued building his empire. But standing there on Sophia's front porch, looking into the eyes of the woman who had once been his everything, Marcus realized that the man he'd been was exactly who he no longer wanted to be. "Can I see them?" Marcus asked, his voice barely steady. Please, Sophia. I know I have no right to ask, but you're right, you don't. Her words were sharp, but her eyes betrayed the conflict raging inside her. You can't just show up here after 5 years and expect to walk into their lives like nothing happened. I'm not asking to walk into their lives. I'm asking for 5 minutes to meet my daughters. He ran a hand through his hair, the careful composure he was famous for completely shattered. I buried my mother 3 days ago, Sophia. She died never knowing she had granddaughters. Don't you think I've lost enough? The mention of Eleanor made Sophia's expression soften slightly. She'd loved his mother, had spent countless Sunday afternoons in Eleanor's tiny kitchen learning family recipes and listening to stories about Marcus as a boy. I'm sorry about Eleanor, she said quietly. She was a wonderful woman. The girls would have loved her. She would have spoiled them rotten. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. She always said she wanted grandchildren to bake cookies with and take to the park. She used to joke that I was too married to my work to ever give her any. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the fading evening light. Finally, she sighed and opened the front door. 5 minutes, she said. But Marcus, I swear to God, if you upset them or make promises you can't keep, I will never forgive you. The inside of Sophia's house was a revelation. Where his penthouse was all clean lines and expensive art, her home was chaos and comfort. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, books were stacked on every surface, and the scent of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. It smelled like the home he'd never had growing up, the kind of place where families actually lived, instead of just existing. Girls, Sophia called, her voice carefully neutral. Can you come here for a minute? Emma and Lily appeared in the doorway, now cleaned up and wearing matching pajamas covered in unicorns. They looked at Marcus with the frank curiosity of children, unafraid but cautious. This is Mr. Blackwood, Sophia said, kneeling down to their level. He was Mommy's friend a long time ago. Before Daddy Michael? Emma asked, tilting her head in a gesture that was so achingly familiar Marcus had to grip the back of a chair to steady himself. He'd seen that exact expression in mirrors, his entire life. Yes, sweetheart. Before Daddy Michael. Marcus knelt down too, bringing himself to their eye level. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. They had Sophia's delicate bone structure and dark hair, but their eyes, their expressions, even the way they stood with one hip cocked, it was like looking at tiny female versions of himself. Hi, he said softly. It's very nice to meet you. Both. You have eyes like ours, Lily said matter-of-factly, the one with the small scar. Are you our real daddy? The question hit the room like a thunderclap. Sophia went rigid, and Marcus felt his heart stop entirely. These children were far too perceptive, too intelligent for their own good. Lily, Sophia said quickly, that's not... It's okay, Marcus interrupted, his eyes never leaving his daughters' faces. That's a very good question, Lily. What do you think? I think maybe, Emma said thoughtfully. You look like us, and Mommy gets sad sometimes when she looks at our baby pictures. She says we remind her of someone special. Marcus glanced at Sophia, who had tears streaming down her face. Your mommy is very smart, he said carefully. And you're both very smart too. But that's something for grown-ups to talk about, okay? Are you rich? Lily asked suddenly. You have fancy clothes like the people on TV. Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. I have enough money, yes. Could you buy us a pony? Emma's eyes lit up with hope. We've been asking Mommy forever, but she says ponies are expensive and we don't have room. Emma, Sophia warned, but Marcus held up a hand. If I could buy you anything in the world, he said seriously, what would you want most? The twins exchanged one of their wordless communications, and then Emma spoke for both of them. We want Mommy to not be sad anymore. She cries sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping, and she works really hard, but we still can't afford dance classes like the other kids. And we want... She hesitated, looking at her sister for courage. We want a daddy who won't go away like Daddy Michael did. The simple, heartbreaking honesty of it nearly destroyed Marcus. These children, his children, weren't asking for ponies, or toys, or the material things his money could easily provide. They wanted security, stability, and for their mother to be happy. They wanted a father who would stay. Time's up, Sophia said abruptly, her voice thick with emotion. Girls, go brush your teeth. I'll be up to read stories in a few minutes. The twins hugged their mother goodnight, and then, to Marcus's shock, Emma approached him shyly. Will we see you again? She asked. Marcus looked at Sophia, who was staring at the floor. I hope so, he said honestly. I really hope so. After the girls disappeared upstairs, Sophia and Marcus stood in awkward silence in her living room. Finally, she spoke. You can't just buy your way into their lives, Marcus. They're not a business deal you can acquire. I know that. He moved closer, and this time she didn't step away. Sophia, I know I was a terrible partner. I know I chose work over us, over you. But I'm not the same man I was 5 years ago. Aren't you? She looked up at him, and he saw the woman who had once loved him completely warring with the mother who would protect her children at any cost. You're still wearing a suit that costs more than I make in a month. You still flew here on a private jet to get what you want. What's really changed, Marcus? Everything, he said desperately. Losing you changed everything. I spent 5 years building an empire, and for what? I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I eat dinner alone every night. I have a penthouse with a view of the entire city, but it's empty. I have everything I thought I wanted, and I've never been more miserable. Sophia's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained guarded. That doesn't mean you're ready to be a father. Being a parent isn't something you can learn from a business manual, Marcus. It's 3 a.m. fevers and scraped knees, and school plays and homework battles. It's putting someone else's needs before your own every single day for the rest of your life. Then, teach me, he said, stepping closer until he could smell her familiar perfume, until he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Let me try, Sophia. Let me prove that I can be the man you needed me to be, the father they deserve. For a moment something flickered in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or the ghost of old love. But then she shook her head and stepped back. I can't. Risk it, she whispered. I can't let them get attached to you just to have you disappear when the novelty wears off, or when your next big deal requires all your attention. They've already lost one father, Marcus. I won't let them lose another. What, if I stayed? The words came out before he could stop them, surprising them both. What if I moved here to Seattle? What if I proved that they're more important than any business deal? Sophia stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. You would never do that. Your entire life is in New York. My life is wherever they are, he said, and realized with startling clarity that he meant it. Sophia, I've spent 5 years trying to fill the hole you left in my life with success and money and meaningless relationships. Nothing worked. But seeing them today, seeing you, I finally understand what my mother always tried to tell me. Success without family is just expensive loneliness. Do you believe Marcus is sincere about changing his priorities? Or is this just another negotiation tactic? What would it take to convince you that someone could truly transform their life for love? Let us know what you think in the comments. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I loved you so much, Marcus. I would have followed you anywhere, done anything to make us work. But you made it clear that I wasn't enough, that we weren't enough. How do I know this isn't just another way for you to get what you want? Because what I want has changed, he said simply. 5 years ago, I wanted to conquer the world. Now I just want to be worthy of being their father. I want to be worthy of you. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Outside, the Seattle rain had started again, pattering against the windows of the little house where his daughters were sleeping, where the woman he'd never stopped loving was trying to decide whether to trust him with the most precious things in her world. 3 weeks later, Marcus was still in Seattle, and Sophia was beginning to believe he might actually be serious. He'd extended his stay indefinitely, conducting business from his hotel suite and showing up at her door every morning with coffee and pastries from the bakery down the street. Not expensive, imported delicacies, just simple croissants and muffins that the girls loved. He'd been patient, respectful, never pushing for more time than Sophia was comfortable giving. He attended Emma's soccer practice and Lily's art class, sitting quietly in the back, learning the rhythms of their lives. He helped with homework at the kitchen table, his expensive suits replaced by jeans and sweaters that made him look younger, more approachable. The girls had warmed to him gradually, their natural curiosity overcoming their initial shyness. They still called him Mr. Marcus, but they'd started saving their best drawings for him and asking if he'd be at their school play next week. Sophia watched it all with a mixture of hope and terror. This version of Marcus, patient, gentle, present, was everything she dreamed he could become. But she couldn't shake the fear that it was all an elaborate performance, that the moment things got difficult or demanding, he'd revert to the man who had chosen his empire over their love. That fear seemed justified when she came home from work on a Thursday evening to find Marcus pacing her living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp with the authority she remembered all too well. "I don't care what the board thinks, James. The Tokyo deal is off the table if they can't meet our terms. And reschedule the Singapore meeting. I'm not available next week." The girls were at the kitchen table, coloring quietly, but Sophia could see the way they'd gone still, the way children do when they sense adult tension. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Marcus's business world bleeding into their peaceful life, his priorities shifting back to deals and profits. "Marcus," she said quietly when he ended the call. He turned, and she saw the stress lines around his eyes, the familiar tension in his shoulders that she remembered from their last months together in New York. "Sorry," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Crisis at the office. One of my biggest clients is threatening to walk if I don't fly to Tokyo tomorrow." Sophia's heart sank. "I see." "No, you don't see." He moved closer, his voice urgent. "Sophia, I'm not going. I told them to handle it without me." "You... what?" "I'm not going," he repeated. "Emma has her school play tomorrow night, and I promised I'd be there. A 4-year-old's debut as a singing flower is more important than any business deal." Sophia stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Marcus, if this client walks, how much will it cost you?" "About 50 million, give or take." He said it like he was discussing the weather. "But I can't put a price on my daughter's face when she sees me in the audience tomorrow night." The casual way he said, "my daughter," made Sophia's chest tighten, with emotion. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd watched Marcus fall completely in love with Emma and Lily, and them with him. But this was the first time he'd claimed them so openly, so naturally. $50 million, she repeated faintly. "It's just money, Sophia. I have plenty of money. What I don't have is another chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning." Before she could respond, Emma came running over, her coloring book in hand. "Mr. Marcus, look what I drew!" She held up a picture of stick figures, a woman with long dark hair, 2 little girls, and a tall man with hazel eyes, all holding hands in front of a house. "It's our family." The word family hit Sophia like a physical blow. Emma had drawn them as a family, complete and whole, the way children saw the world in simple, honest terms. Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, his voice gentle. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Can I keep it?" "Really? You want to keep my drawing?" "I want to keep it forever," he said seriously. It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. Emma beamed and threw her arms around his neck, and Sophia watched Marcus close his eyes, holding his daughter like she was made of spun glass and starlight. That night, after the girls were in bed, Sophia and Marcus sat on her front porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the Seattle skyline twinkle in the distance. "I need to tell you something," Sophia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus tensed beside her. "What is it?" "When I left New York, I didn't just leave. Because of the PhD program." She took a shaky breath. "I left because I was pregnant and I was terrified to tell you." Marcus went very still. "Terrified? Of me?" "Of what you'd do. Of how you'd react." The words came out in a rush, 5 years of guilt and fear spilling over. "You were so focused on building your empire, so determined to prove yourself. I was afraid you'd see the babies as a burden, an obstacle to your success, or worse, that you'd try to control everything, hire nannies, send them to boarding schools, turn them into little accessories for your perfect life." "Jesus, Sophia." Marcus's voice was raw with pain. "Is that really what you thought of me? I thought you were brilliant and driven and capable of anything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I also thought you'd lost sight of what really mattered. And I couldn't bear the thought of our children growing up feeling like they were competing with your business for your attention." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You were right," he said simply. "The man I was 5 years ago would have done exactly what you were afraid of. I would have hired the best nannies money could buy, and convinced myself I was being a good father by providing for them financially. I would have missed school plays, for board meetings and bedtime stories for conference calls." "Marcus, no, let me finish." He turned to face her, and in the porch light, she could see tears on his cheeks. "I spent 5 years hating you for leaving, thinking you'd abandoned me for someone better. But you didn't abandon me, Sophia. You saved our daughters from having a father who wasn't ready to put them first." The admission hung between them like a bridge finally ready to be crossed. "But I am ready now," he continued. "These past 3 weeks, watching them, learning who they are, they're the most incredible little people I've ever met. Emma with her fierce determination, and Lily with her gentle heart. They're funny and smart and kind. And they're mine. They're ours. Marcus, I know I have no right to ask this, and I know I have years of trust to rebuild. But Sophia, I want to be their father. Not just financially, not just on weekends or holidays. I want to be here for scraped knees and bad dreams and homework battles. I want to teach them to ride bikes and scare away boys when they're teenagers, and walk them down the aisle someday." Sophia was crying openly now, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. "And I want to be worthy of you again," he whispered. "I know I hurt you. I know I chose wrong 5 years ago. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you and the girls are the only empire I need. What do you think Sophia should do? Can someone really change this completely, or is she setting herself and her daughters up for heartbreak? Share your thoughts about second chances and whether love can truly conquer past mistakes." Before Sophia could respond, the front door opened and Lily appeared in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Mommy, I had a bad dream," she said, then noticed Marcus. "Oh, hi, Mr. Marcus. Are you staying for breakfast again?" Marcus looked at Sophia, a question in his eyes. She nodded, her heart full of terrifying hope. "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus said, scooping Lily into his arms. "I'm staying for breakfast, and if your mommy says it's okay, maybe I'll stay for a lot more breakfasts too." As they walked inside together, Sophia, Marcus, and the little girl who had his eyes and her mother's trusting heart, Sophia realized that sometimes the most important revelations came not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the quiet decision to believe that people could change, that love could heal, and that families could be rebuilt from the ashes of old mistakes. 2 months had passed since that night on the porch, and Marcus had kept every promise. He'd moved into a modest apartment 10 minutes from Sophia's house, close enough to be present but far enough to respect her boundaries. He'd restructured his entire business, promoting trusted executives to handle day-to-day operations while he managed things remotely. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Blackwood had put family before fortune. The girls had started calling him Daddy Marcus, a compromise that made his heart soar every time he heard it. He'd learned to braid hair, badly, mastered the art of making pancakes shaped like animals, and could recite "Goodnight Moon" from memory. Emma had taught him to play tea party, while Lily had shown him her secret hiding spot in the backyard, where she kept her collection of special rocks. Sophia had begun to let her guard down, allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful from the ashes of their past. There were moments, when Marcus helped with bedtime routines, when he cheered louder than anyone at Emma's soccer games, when he held Lily during thunderstorms, that felt like the family she'd always dreamed of. But on a gray Tuesday morning, in November, everything came crashing down. Sophia was at work when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's number, but the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Ms. Chen? This is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with Seattle PD. I'm calling about Marcus Blackwood." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "What's wrong? Is he hurt?" "Ma'am, Mr. Blackwood has been arrested on charges of securities fraud and embezzlement. The FBI raided his apartment this morning as part of a federal investigation." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She sank into her office chair, the room spinning around her. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." "I'm afraid not, ma'am. The charges are quite serious. Mr. Blackwood asked me to call you, said you'd need to know because of the children." The children. Emma and Lily, who had finally started to trust, to believe they had a father who would never leave them. How could she possibly explain this? "Where is he now?" Sophia managed to ask. "King County Jail. His arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Sophia hung up and immediately called her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, asking her to pick up the girls from school. Then she drove to the jail, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, her mind reeling with questions and fears. The visiting room was sterile and cold, nothing like the warm spaces where she'd watched Marcus become a father over the past months. When he appeared behind the glass partition, he looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his eyes hollow with defeat. "Sophia," he said through the phone, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry." "Tell me it's not true," she whispered. "Tell me this is all some terrible mistake." Marcus closed his eyes, and when he opened them she saw the truth written in his expression. "It's complicated," he said. "The charges, some of them are true, but not the way they're making it sound." Sophia felt her world tilt on its axis. "What do you mean some of them are true?" 5 years ago, when I was building the company, I made some decisions. I cut corners, bent rules. I told myself it was necessary, that I'd fix everything once I was successful enough. But I never did. I just kept building on that foundation, and now it's all coming down. You lied to me." The words came out flat, emotionless. "All this time, you've been lying." "No, Sophia, that's not. You let me believe you'd changed. You let my daughters believe they finally had a father they could count on. And all this time, you were a criminal." "I am not a criminal," Marcus's voice rose, drawing looks from other visitors. "I made mistakes, yes. I did things I'm not proud of. But everything I've done these past months, everything I've felt for you and the girls, that's real. That's the most real thing in my life." Sophia stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't do this. I can't put my children through this. Sophia, please." "No." She was crying now, her voice breaking. "I trusted you. Against every instinct, every warning sign, I let myself believe you'd changed. I let them believe it too. I have changed. This doesn't change that, doesn't it? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You're going to prison, Marcus. Even if you get out, even if you beat some of these charges, your life is going to be a circus of lawyers and trials and media attention. That's not the life I want for my daughters. Our daughters, he said desperately. They're our daughters, Sophia. You can't just take them away from me. Watch me. The coldness in her own voice surprised her. I did it once before to protect them, and I'll do it again. She hung up the phone and walked away, ignoring Marcus's voice calling her name through the glass. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and sobbed until she had no tears left, mourning not just for the man she'd fallen in love with all over again, but for the father her daughters were about to lose. That evening, she sat Emma and Lily down at the kitchen table, their innocent faces expectant and trusting. Girls, I need to tell you something about Daddy Marcus, she began, her voice carefully steady. Is he sick? Emma asked, her hazel eyes wide with concern. No, sweetheart, but he has to go away for a while. Like Daddy Michael went away? Lily's voice was small, frightened. Sophia's heart shattered. Not like Daddy Michael, baby. Daddy Marcus isn't hurt. But he made some mistakes at work, and now he has to fix them. It might take a very long time. But he promised he wouldn't leave us, Emma said, her voice rising with panic. He promised he'd stay forever and ever. I know, sweetheart. I know he promised. When is he coming back? Lily asked. Sophia looked at her daughters, Marcus's daughters, and saw her own hazel eyes staring back at her, full of trust and hope, and the kind of innocent faith that adults spent their whole lives trying to recapture. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know if he's coming back at all. The girls cried then, the heartbroken sobs of children who had dared to believe in forever, only to have it snatched away. Sophia held them both, her own tears falling into their dark hair, and wondered how she would ever forgive herself for letting this happen. Later that night, after the girls had finally cried themselves to sleep, Sophia sat alone in her living room, staring at Emma's drawing that still hung on the refrigerator. The stick figure family, complete and whole and happy. She thought about taking it down, but couldn't bring herself to destroy her daughter's innocent vision of what they could have been. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is James, Marcus's assistant. He wanted you to know that he's transferred $2 million to an account in the girls' names for their future. He also wanted me to tell you that loving you and them was the only thing he ever did right. Sophia stared at the message until the words blurred through her. Tears. Even now, even facing prison, Marcus was trying to take care of them the only way he knew how. With money. It was generous. It was thoughtful. And it broke her heart because it proved that despite everything, he still didn't understand that what they needed wasn't his wealth. What they needed was him. And now, just like 5 years ago, he was gone. You think Sophia is being too harsh? Or is she right to protect her daughters from the chaos of Marcus's legal troubles? What would you do in her situation? Stand by someone you love, or put your children's stability first? Share your thoughts below. Outside, the Seattle rain began to fall again, and Sophia Chen sat alone in the house where laughter used to live, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the most necessary sacrifice of her heart. 6 months later, Sophia's life had settled into a new routine, built around the absence of Marcus Blackwood. The girls had stopped asking when Daddy Marcus was coming home, though she sometimes caught them staring out the window with the patient hope of children who still believed in miracles. Emma had grown quieter, more serious, while Lily had started having nightmares again. Sophia threw herself into work, taking on extra clients at the community center, anything to keep her mind off the man who had turned their world upside down. Twice now. She'd moved the $2 million Marcus had left for the girls into a trust fund, untouched. Blood money, she told herself. Though late at night she wondered if that was fair. The media circus around Marcus's case had been brutal. Tech moguls, fall from grace, and the Blackwood scandal dominated headlines for weeks. Sophia had shielded the girls from most of it, but she couldn't shield herself from the photos of Marcus in handcuffs, the speculation about his guilt, the way reporters made him sound like a monster. She was at the grocery store on a Saturday morning when she ran into David Chen, Marcus's former private investigator. She almost didn't recognize him in casual clothes, pushing a cart with a toddler strapped in the front. "Sophia," he said, his face lighting up with recognition. "How are you? How are the girls?" "We're fine," she said automatically, the response she'd perfected over the past months. David studied her face with the keen eye of someone trained to read people. "Are you really?" Something in his tone made her defenses crumble slightly. "Some days are better than others." "I imagine they are." He glanced around the busy store, then back at her. "Listen, I know this isn't my place, but there are things about Marcus's case that you should know. Things that didn't make it into the news." Sophia's stomach clenched. "I don't want to hear it, David. Whatever he didn't do it." David's voice was quiet but firm. "Not the way they're saying he did. The FBI doesn't arrest people for nothing." "No, they don't, but they also don't always get the whole story." David's toddler started fussing, and he absently handed the child a toy. "Sophia." Marcus took the fall for someone else, someone who was supposed to be his friend. Despite herself, Sophia found herself listening. His business partner, Richard Hawthorne. They built the company together, but Richard was the one handling the questionable investments, the offshore accounts. When the investigation started, Richard made sure all the evidence pointed to Marcus. That's impossible. Marcus would have fought back, would have exposed him. He tried. But Richard had been planning this for years, covering his tracks, making sure Marcus looked guilty. And when it came down to it, David paused, his expression pained. "Marcus chose to protect you and the girls rather than fight." Sophia's world tilted. "What do you mean?" "Richard threatened to drag you into it. Said he'd make sure the investigation looked into your finances, your background, make your life hell. He knew about the girls, Sophia. He knew Marcus would do anything to keep you safe." The grocery store suddenly felt too bright, too loud. Sophia gripped her cart to steady herself. "You're lying." "I wish I was." David pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. "Look, I've been investigating this on my own time. I found evidence that could clear Marcus, but it's complicated. The legal system moves slowly, and Marcus, he's given up. He thinks he's protecting you by staying quiet." Sophia stared at the phone screen, seeing financial records and email chains that meant nothing to her, but everything to David's trained. Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because that man loves you, and those girls more than his own life. And because I've seen what prison is doing to him." David's voice was gentle but urgent. "He's not the same person, Sophia. He's broken. He thinks he's lost everything that matters, so he's stopped fighting for himself. I can't deal with this right now." Sophia started to push her cart away, but David caught her arm gently. "There's something else. Something I think you need to see." He showed her another document on his phone, a letter, handwritten in Marcus's familiar script. "If something happens to me, make sure Sophia knows that every decision I made was to protect her and our daughters. I would rather spend my life in prison than see them hurt because of my mistakes. Tell her that loving them was the only thing I ever did right, and that I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to be the man they deserved from the beginning." Sophia's vision blurred with tears. "When did he write this?" "The night before his arrest. He knew it was coming, Sophia. Richard had given him a heads up, probably hoping Marcus would run and make himself look even more guilty. But Marcus stayed. He stayed because running would have made things worse for you." The letter shook in Sophia's hands, All these months, she'd been angry at Marcus for lying, for putting them through this nightmare. But what if he'd been trying to protect them all along? "What can I do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Visit him. Let him know you don't hate him. Let him know the girls are okay." David's expression was earnest. "And maybe, if you're willing, help me prove his innocence. I can't do this alone, but with your support, with someone who believes in him." That afternoon, Sophia called Mrs. Patterson to watch the girls and drove to the King County Jail for the first time since that terrible day 6 months ago. Her hands shook as she signed in, as she waited in the sterile visiting room, as she tried to prepare herself for seeing the man she'd once loved. Still loved, if she was honest with herself. When Marcus appeared behind the glass, Sophia barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and hollow. His hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp and unkempt. But it was his eyes that broke her heart. They were empty, defeated, like he'd given up on everything, including himself. He picked up the phone with trembling hands, his voice hoarse when he spoke. "Sophia, you shouldn't be here." "David Chen told me the truth," she said without preamble. "About Richard, about what really happened." Marcus closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging. "David should mind his own business." "Should he? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're protecting a man who destroyed your life." "I'm protecting you," Marcus said fiercely, the first spark of life she'd seen in his eyes. "And the girls. That's all that matters. What about fighting for the truth? What about proving your innocence? What's the point?" Marcus's voice was flat again. "Even if I could prove Richard set me up, even if I got out tomorrow, what then? You've made it clear you don't want me in your life. The girls probably don't even remember me." "They ask about you every day," Sophia said, and watched Marcus's composure finally crack. "Emma keeps your drawing on her nightstand. Lily still sets a place for you at dinner sometimes, just in case you come home." Marcus put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "They need their father, Marcus. Not your money, not your guilt. They need you. But they need you to fight. They need you to be strong enough to come home to them." When Marcus looked up, there were tears streaming down his face, but something had changed in his expression. The emptiness was gone, replaced by a flicker of the determination she remembered. "I don't know how," he whispered. "I don't know how to fight this." "You don't have to do it alone," Sophia said, placing her hand against the glass. "David has evidence. I'll help however I can. But Marcus, you have to want this. You have to want to come home." Marcus pressed his hand against the glass, matching hers. "I want to come home more than I want to breathe." "Then fight," she said simply. "Fight for them. Fight for us." What do you think it takes for someone to find the strength to fight back when everything seems hopeless? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and fighting for yourself? Share your thoughts about finding courage in the darkest moments. For the first time in 6 months, Marcus Blackwood looked like a man who had something to live for. And for the first time since his arrest, Sophia Chen allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, their story wasn't over yet. The next 3 months became a whirlwind of legal battles, late-night strategy sessions, and painstaking investigation. Sophia had never imagined herself becoming an amateur detective, but she threw herself into helping David uncover the truth with the same fierce determination she'd once seen Marcus apply to building his empire. They worked methodically through Richard Hawthorne's carefully constructed web of lies. David's contacts in law enforcement helped them trace offshore accounts and hidden transactions. Sophia used her psychology background to analyze Richard's behavioral patterns, helping them predict where he might have hidden evidence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Richard's ex-wife, Miranda, who had been quietly collecting evidence of her husband's illegal activities for years, planning her own escape from their toxic marriage. "He kept everything," Miranda told them during a clandestine meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. Richard's paranoid about being betrayed, so he documents every conversation, every deal, every threat he makes. He thinks it protects him, but really it's going to destroy him. She handed them a flash drive with shaking hands. This has recordings of him bragging about framing Marcus, emails detailing how he manipulated the evidence, financial records showing where he really hid the stolen money. I've been too scared to come forward, but when I heard about Marcus's daughters, she trailed off, tears in her eyes. No child should lose their father because of my husband's greed. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Richard had not only embezzled millions from their company, but had systematically destroyed Marcus's reputation to cover his tracks. The recordings were particularly devastating. Richard's voice, clear and unmistakable, laughing about how easy it had been to manipulate that lovesick fool Marcus. Marcus's new legal team, led by the brilliant defense attorney Sarah Kim, moved quickly to present the evidence to the court. The media, which had been so eager to tear Marcus down, now scrambled to cover the dramatic reversal of fortune. But the most important moment came on a Tuesday morning in March, when Sophia sat in the courtroom gallery with Emma and Lily, watching, as the judge reviewed the new evidence. The girls had insisted on coming, despite Sophia's concerns about exposing them to the legal proceedings. "We want to see Daddy Marcus get free," Emma had said with the stubborn determination that reminded Sophia so much of Marcus himself. "We want to be there when he comes home." The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, but Sophia only had eyes for Marcus as he sat at the defendant's table. He'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost, and his lawyer had helped him clean up his appearance, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly, as he waited for the judge's decision. After reviewing the new evidence presented by the defense, Judge Patricia Morrison said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom, "This court finds that there is substantial proof of prosecutorial misconduct and evidence tampering. In this case," Sophia held her breath, squeezing the girl's hands, "the charges against Marcus Blackwood are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Blackwood, you are free to go." The courtroom erupted in chaos, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, lawyers conferring in urgent whispers. But Sophia only saw Marcus as he turned around, his eyes searching the crowd until they found hers. Emma and Lily broke free from her grip and ran toward the barrier separating the gallery from the defendant's area. "Daddy Marcus! Daddy Marcus!" they called, their voices cutting through the noise. The bailiff started to stop them, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. "Let them through," she said, her stern expression softening. "I think this family has waited long enough." Marcus dropped to his knees as his daughters reached him, gathering them into his arms as if they were the most precious things in the world. Sophia watched through tears as he held them, his face buried in their hair, his shoulders shaking with relief and joy. "I'm sorry," he whispered to them, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I was gone so long." "It's okay, Daddy Marcus," Lily said, patting his cheek with her small hand. "Mommy said you were fighting the bad guys. Did you win?" "Yes, baby girl," Marcus said, looking up at Sophia over their heads. "I think I finally won." The media frenzy that followed was intense but brief. Richard Hawthorne was arrested within hours of Marcus's release, and the evidence Miranda had provided led to additional charges of fraud, conspiracy, and witness tampering. The man who had tried to destroy Marcus's life would spend the next 20 years in prison. But Marcus barely paid attention to his vindication in the press. He was too busy relearning how to be a father, how to fit back into the life he'd been torn away from. Sophia had been afraid that the months of separation might have damaged his relationship with the girls, but children were remarkably resilient. Within days, it was as if he'd never been gone. The real test came 2 weeks after his release, when Marcus showed up at Sophia's door with a suitcase and a nervous expression. "I know I don't have the right to ask," he said, standing on the porch, where they'd shared so many important conversations. "But I was wondering," Could I stay? Not in your room, not as your partner. I know I have to earn that back. But maybe on the couch or in the guest room. I can't bear to be away from them again. Away from you." Sophia looked at this man who had sacrificed everything to protect her and their daughters, who had endured months in prison rather than put them at risk, who had fought his way back to them against impossible odds. "The guest room has a leak in the ceiling," she said finally, "and the couch is too short for someone your height." Marcus's face fell, and he started to turn away. "But," Sophia continued, her heart pounding, "my room has plenty of space, if you're interested." Marcus spun around, hope blazing in his hazel eyes. "Sophia, are you sure? After everything I've put you through—" "You didn't put us through anything," she said firmly. "Richard Hawthorne did. You protected us, Marcus. You chose us over everything else, even your freedom. That's not the action of a man who hasn't changed. That's the action of a man who loves his family more than his own life." Marcus crossed the porch in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you," he whispered. "I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I tried to stop, tried to protect my heart, but I couldn't. You're part of me, Marcus. You always have been." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. It tasted like forgiveness and second chances, like the promise of better days ahead. "Ooh, Mommy and Daddy Marcus are kissing." Emma's voice came from the doorway, followed by Lily's giggles. They broke apart, laughing, and Marcus scooped both girls into his arms. "Get used to it," he told them with a grin. "I plan on kissing your mommy a lot from now on." "Are you going to marry her?" Lily asked with the directness of a 4-year-old. Marcus looked at Sophia, his eyes serious despite his smile. "If she'll have me. If she thinks I'm worthy of being her husband and your daddy for real. We already drew you in our family picture," Emma pointed out practically. "So you have to stay forever now. What do you think makes a family? Is it blood, or love, or the choice to stay and fight for each other through the hardest times?" Share your thoughts about what this story means to you in the comments below. As they walked into the house together, Marcus, Sophia, Emma, and Lily. Sophia realized that sometimes the most beautiful families weren't the ones that came together easily, but the ones that were forged in the fire of adversity and chose to love each other anyway. The stick figure drawing was still on the refrigerator, a little faded now but still there. Emma's vision of their family, complete and whole and happy. It had taken longer than any of them expected, and the path had been more difficult than they could have imagined, but they had finally become the family that little girl had drawn, with such innocent faith. They were home. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the backyard of their new house, not his penthouse, not Sophia's cramped rental, but a home they'd chosen together in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a big yard, perfect for tire swings and garden parties. He was attempting to assemble an elaborate wooden play set while Emma and Lily helped by handing him the wrong screws and offering contradictory advice. "Daddy, I think that piece goes the other way," Emma said, her head tilted in that familiar gesture that never failed to make his heart skip. "No, Emma, it goes up, not sideways," Lily corrected, her small hands covered in dirt from the flower bed she'd been helping Sophia plant. Marcus paused in his work, looking at his daughters. Officially, his daughters now, after the adoption papers had been finalized 3 months ago. They wore matching overalls and had identical smudges of chocolate on their faces from the cookies Sophia had baked that morning. At 5 years old, they were becoming their own people. Emma, the natural leader, fierce and protective. Lily, the gentle dreamer with an artist's soul. But they were unmistakably his. "You know what?" he said, setting down his screwdriver. "I think this playset needs to be christened properly before we finish building it." "What's christened mean?" Lily asked. It Means we need to test it out. Marcus grinned and scooped both girls up, one under each arm, carrying them to the partially assembled swing set. Who wants to try the swings first? Their delighted squeals brought Sophia to the back door, her hands covered in flour, her hair escaping from its ponytail, looking more beautiful than any magazine cover model he'd ever seen. Marcus Blackwood, if you let them get hurt on that half-built death trap, I'm going to kill you myself, she called. But she was laughing. It's perfectly safe, he called back, gently placing Emma on one of the completed swings. I'm a very accomplished businessman. I know how to read instructions. You're holding the instructions upside down, Sophia pointed out, walking over to join them. Marcus looked down at the manual in his hands and realized she was right. Details, he said with a shrug, then pulled her close for a kiss that tasted like vanilla and home. Gross! Emma and Lily chorused, but they were giggling. The past year had been a journey of healing and rebuilding. Marcus had restructured his business completely, selling off the more demanding ventures and focusing on sustainable, ethical investments that allowed him to work from home most days. He discovered that he was actually a better businessman. When he wasn't consumed by the need to prove himself, his decisions were more thoughtful, his partnerships more genuine, his success more meaningful. Sophia had finished her PhD in child psychology, writing her dissertation on resilience in children who had experienced family trauma. She'd been offered positions at prestigious universities, but she'd chosen to stay at the community center, working with families who needed her most. Marcus had never been prouder of anyone in his life. They'd been married 6 months ago in a small ceremony in Sophia's backyard, with Emma and Lily as flower girls and Eleanor's wedding ring, which Marcus had kept all these years, on Sophia's finger. Judge Morrison, who had become an unlikely friend, had officiated. David Chen had been Marcus's best man, and Miranda Hawthorne, now divorced and rebuilding her own life, had been Sophia's maid of honor. "Daddy, push me higher," Emma called from the swing, her legs pumping as she tried to reach the clouds. Me too, Lily chimed in from the other swing. Marcus positioned himself between the swings, giving each girl a gentle push in turn. How high do you want to go? To the moon, Lily declared. To the stars, Emma added. Well, we might need a bigger swing set for that, Marcus said seriously. But I think we can manage the treetops. As he pushed his daughters higher, listening to their laughter ring out across the yard, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. The mistakes he'd made, the time he'd lost, the pain they'd all endured. It had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this perfect ordinary afternoon with his family. Marcus, Sophia said softly, coming to stand beside him, there's something I need to tell you. Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. She was smiling, but there was a nervous energy about her that reminded him of the day she'd told him about the twins. What is it? He asked, his heart suddenly racing. Sophia glanced at the girls, who were still swinging and chattering about their plans to build a rocket ship to reach the moon, then back at Marcus. I'm pregnant, she whispered. Marcus felt the world stop spinning. You're... what? Pregnant. About 8 weeks along. Sophia's smile grew wider as she watched the news sink in. I know we didn't plan this, and I know things are just getting settled, but... Marcus silenced her with a kiss that was fierce and joyful, and full of all the love he couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. Are you happy? Sophia asked, her voice uncertain. Happy? Marcus laughed, the sound rich with wonder. Sophia, I'm terrified and thrilled and grateful and completely overwhelmed. I'm everything all at once. So that's a yes? That's the biggest yes of my life. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. Another little person to love, to protect, to read bedtime stories to. Another chance to get it right from the beginning. What are you guys talking about? Emma had stopped swinging and was looking at them with curious eyes. Marcus and Sophia exchanged a look. They'd planned to wait a few more weeks before telling the girls, but Emma had always been too perceptive for her own good. "Well," Sophia said, kneeling down so she was at eye level with both girls, "how would you feel about being big sisters?" Emma's eyes went wide. "You mean there's going to be a baby?" "In about 7 months," Marcus confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. Lily clapped her hands together. "Can we name it? Can we teach it to swing? Will it have eyes like ours?" "Probably," Marcus said, thinking about genetics and family traits and the miracle of creating life with the woman he loved. "But even if it doesn't, it will still be perfect." "Because it will be ours," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Just like we're yours now, even though we didn't start that way." The simple wisdom of it took Marcus's breath away. Family wasn't just about blood or genetics or legal documents. It was about choice, about commitment, about showing up every day and choosing to love each other through the good times and the bad. As the sun began to set over their backyard, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Marcus gathered his family close. Sophia leaned against his chest, her hand resting on their growing child. Emma and Lily pressed against his sides, chattering excitedly about all the things they would teach their new sibling. "I love you," he whispered to Sophia, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd been through, everything they'd overcome, everything they were building together. "I love you too," she whispered back. "All of us. This whole beautiful, complicated, perfect family." Marcus looked around at the house they'd made into a home, at the playset he'd probably never finish building correctly, at the garden where his daughters would grow up playing and learning and becoming the amazing women he knew they'd be. He thought about the baby growing inside Sophia, about the future stretching out before them full of possibility and promise. He'd spent years chasing success, building an empire, accumulating wealth and power, and all the things he'd thought would make him happy. But sitting here in his backyard with dirt under his fingernails and his family in his arms, Marcus Blackwood finally understood what his mother had tried to tell him all those years ago. Success wasn't measured in dollars or deals or magazine covers. Success was measured in moments like this, in children's laughter and a wife's smile, in bedtime stories and scraped knees, and the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where you belonged. He was the richest man in the world, and it had nothing to do with his bank account. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Emma pointed upward with wonder. "Look, Daddy, the stars are coming out to say hello." Marcus looked up at the vast expanse of sky, thinking about wishes and dreams and the infinite possibilities that lay ahead for his growing family. "Hello, stars," he whispered, and meant it as a prayer of gratitude for second chances, for love that conquered all obstacles, and for the beautiful chaos of a life lived fully and completely surrounded by the people who mattered most. In the distance, a church bell chimed the hour, and somewhere in the neighborhood, another family was sitting down to dinner. Another father was reading bedtime stories. Another mother was tucking children into bed with kisses and promises of tomorrow. The world was full of families like theirs, imperfect, resilient, bound together by love and choice, and the daily decision to keep showing up for each other. And in this moment, in this backyard, with these people, Marcus Blackwood had everything he'd ever truly wanted. He was home.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.